Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Well, good morning from Gainesville. This is Stan, and today we're discussing color pickers, touring, making a good impression, head lighting, and California dreaming, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the magnificent Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. So welcome everyone to episode 223. And today we welcome back Stan to the show. How are things going at Light Talk Central?
Who is Stan?
You're holding down the fort at Light Talk Central. That's who you are.
Yeah, as the hurricanes are coming. There's one on the way. Nothing. Piece of cake.
Hey, you know something? I was checking out Facebook this week, and I must have seen a dozen notices of people's shows opening, and I think that is really great.
Well, I mean, what else are you going to say? It's unfortunate that their show is opening. Yeah, it's great.
It's great. It's great news. I mean,
people need a paycheck. You know, they're still struggling down in Houston, though. I mean, the governor here has, canceled that supplemental federal money for unemployment, and stagehands in Houston are just dying down there.
Wow.
They're thinking they'll be up and running. I was listening to them on the news last night, and they thought they would be kind of, semi-safe again come November. But they still got to get through the summer and get to the fall.
I'm surprised they're not open now, knowing Texas.
They're taking shows out of town. They got hit hard down there.
Yeah. How about Florida? Are things opening up as far as
How
theaters
about those
in Florida?
Vaccines?
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about shows opening. I mean,
I don't know.
Okay. But you're busy. I mean, you're back at work, Stan.
We are. You were asking me earlier how things are going at Light Talk Central. So I'm working mostly in architecture now, as you know, and it's the boom of the Biden bucks. There's FEMA money. There's CARES money. There's a lot of money in the coffers of municipalities. And I think, as is evidenced tragically this last week with this building collapse in Florida, which you've got to be living under a rock to not know about that, taking care of your infrastructure matters. And we've got, 50 years of deferred maintenance in this country, whether it's a bridge or whether it's a school or whatever it might be.
Airport.
So airport, you right. Name it. So there's a lot of work coming. And we can see pardon the pun, but we can see the tsunami. We've been sending out proposals for weeks, for months, actually. I've been busy. Proposal after proposal. We're not getting every project, which we'll talk about later in our LTA, but the money's flowing, and projects are really picking up. Educated guess, it will be sustained because we haven't been spending money on keeping our buildings and our infrastructure in shape for a long time. So hopefully that bodes well.
Yeah, it sounds like it is. Puts all our friends back at work, whether they're designers or stagehands or construction workers. These people need work, and it's great to see that happening. So that being said, let's get started with the show. Steve has our first question.
Yes, it comes to us from Ryan in Alabama. And Ryan says, what the hell is a California plug?
Well, I didn't know that. I don't know the answer to this. I'll be quite honest.
I'm waiting to hear this one because I think I have a guess, but I'm not going to guess.
No way. I mean, you're an architect. No. You should know this stuff. So a California plug. Actually, it's called a California standard. Hubble makes it. There might be a couple other companies, but it's called a California standard. And that is a 50 amp plug.
I knew that.
And it works under 125, 250, or 480, either in single or three phase. And typically what a California standard plug is used for is to energize an extension cord or a direct connected equipment. So think power distro, think temporary power box, or emergency equipment. It's an odd-looking receptacle. It is a twist lock with 3 slots. But the male plug has a conical pin sticking in the center. Now, the ones I've worked with, there are 2 hots, a neutral, and a ground. I think the center pin is just an alignment tool. You're going to see these a lot trailer mounted. If you look at like a beer truck or a mobile concession stand, that has a CS twist lock on it. And it originates, like almost everything does, in Hollywood. And it's my understanding that Hollywood forever has used a lot of portable power generations for location work. And then they leave that generator on site for, a couple days or weeks or maybe a month. So the industry came up with a specialized configuration so that people in the area could not walk up and plug things into the generators, thus screwing the production schedule. And the idea is caught on in other industries. If you're just running around, the next time you're in your doctor's office, you'll probably notice that those are CS plugs. They're a little pricey. It's about $70 for a male and $110 for a female. But that is a California plug.
So I have a couple of questions here. First of all, I understand why they would want to make a specialized plug so that people can't just plug in the generators that are outside on location. But why would a doctor's office have them? I mean, are we talking about in the waiting room where people can't charge their iPads and things like that?
No, back in the offices where they have equipment. The male and the female, I'll post a picture of it. There's a shroud on it. So it locks and then locks a second time. And it is a twist lock, but it's a hybrid. So you can't just put a standard twist. You can't just unlock that twist lock and go to Home Depot and buy yourself one and stick it in there, even though you would think that you could.
And Steve, you said it's a pretty large amperage, right? What did you say the amperage was on that?
They come. I've only seen them in 50 amp plugs.
Yeah,
but it's my understanding they also come in 100 and 200 amp plugs.
Yeah, we had them at Production Arts on some of the power distros back in the day. I didn't know the term, the California plug, but I do remember them.
Back in the day, I rented a rig for a small tour, and it came with kind of a pre-rig truss and stuff like that on it, but it's first generation. We had a problem with the connector. We opened it up, and they had filled the connector with hot melt glue. So when you took the back off, that was their way of waterproofing the connection.
Oh, interesting.
And, God, it was not interesting. It was a pain in the butt. I had to carve out all the hot melt glue to fix the connector.
Kathy in Omaha writes, I work for a professional children's theater company. We tour our shows regionally. How should I think about my design when we take it on tour to various theaters? Yeah, it's a good question. So, there's a lot of that regional sort of tours, and you're going to have a different mix of venues. And so you might have done it originally in your home theater. And how should you go about considering that? I just had a couple of things, and then I'll open it up. I think you want to think about essence, like what is the essence of the design, on what are the things that you absolutely cannot do without. So you want to make sure that where you go, you can get those elements there, whether it's a color or a special or something that really makes the end of a scene that are really, really important. So you have to sort of pare it down. The other thing I would think about is really be practical. How much time do you really have to put these shows in? One day you could be going into a really nice, well-equipped high school theater. The next day you could be going into an elementary school where it's a cafeteria and there's just a platform, right? And so you don't know what you're going to have. So you really have to think about the range of things and maybe do some scouting out ahead to find out what you can and can't do. And then the third thing I would say is when you pick those things, try and be consistent from venue to venue, because in certain areas, people will talk about the production and we didn't see that in our show, or in your show there was a bubble machine at the end, and then in ours we didn't see the bubble machine. Well, maybe there wasn't power for the bubble machine. So whatever it might be, I think that's kind of a starting place to sort of get your head around how you're going to be able to take that thing and deliver the impact to the audience, regardless of where it's going to be and what the facilities might be.
Steve, you've done a lot of tours. What do you think?
Well, I think the first thing you do is you contact all the venues you're going to, and you have them send you an equipment list and have them send you a ground plan, so that when you start developing your show to tour, you look at all of this, you look at each space, and you create a light plot for each space. I agree. If you go back and you look at let's say your big light plot has 100 lights in it. Then I think if your other venues, let's say, have 50 at every venue, I think you go back to your big plot and divide your rig up into A and B lights. The A you absolutely have to have. The B would be kind of nice if you had it. So, instead of a 3-color front wash, then you say, well, I can get by with a 1-color front wash, but it has to be the 201, or it has to be the clear. And, you have a priority about what what you're trying to accomplish at each stop. But the first step is go ahead and draft up all of your plots, get with the electrician at all of these venues, and talk through your show before you ever, pack up the station wagon and head out the door.
I think if you're in Nebraska, for example, like I'm thinking about the Omaha Children's Theater, which you can go to some nice venues in Lincoln, and then you're going to go out to some venues in the boondocks that literally really it's a lunchroom that you're going to perform in.
Right.
So I think there's such a range, and if there's an electrician and there's a light plot that you can get your hands on, great. But these people deal with such a range of environments. So I think, this is a children's theater thing. I get it's depending upon the circuit that you're working. So I'm thinking, because of where she is, and I happen to know that there's the Omaha Children's Theater really does that whole region of the Midwest. There's just such a spectrum of they might literally be in a barn, or a metal building. So how do you gotta? So yeah, I think if the venues have facilities, get the information, as Steve says. But if they don't, you really got to sort of be resourceful and clever and know how you're going to get sometimes maybe the effects are things that you carry that don't need anything else except a plug on the wall, right? It just depends on the show.
As part of my first job's responsibility working at the Miami Opera, as well as being a resident assistant, I was in charge of designing their school tours. And the school tour was usually a 1-act opera that was cut down to like 40 minutes, because it had to fit within the period. And we would hit all the high schools in the Miami area. And we brought our own lighting. We basically had 2 GD towers and a couple of floor stands and our own dimmers. We just, brought it all. And it was me and one other guy who set up everything. And then we had one person who dealt with props and all that. So yeah, the variety of these different school cafetoriums were huge. And sometimes they had systems.
Well, at that point, if it's that barren wasteland of, Mad Max, then I think what's happening is you need to keep the main thing, and that is to see the performer on stage. So there may be a show in which you have one light cue. It's just good, clean light, and you let them perform. Or maybe you have a happy look and a sad look. The worst thing you can do is to try to do something that's simply not going to work. Instead of a full stage blue backwash, you've got one Lico and you can kind of light the center, and then everything else goes into gray and you can't quite see people. So you stay focused on what you're trying to do, which is present the show. And at that point, you can't go wrong because the audience is already used to coming into that venue, so they know what they're walking into. They know that they're not getting, the road show of Cats when they come into the middle school cafeteria, which has 8 Source 4, LED fixtures in front of house.
Luxury.
And then, half a dozen R40 strip lights on stage. Just keep it simple and keep it really clean and get out of the way of the actors and let them do what they do.
Right. Well, Kaylee in Vermont writes, when you start the design process, when do you actually start to see the lighting in your head? Well, I think that's a very individual question, and I think that the three of us will probably answer it all differently, and every designer will answer it differently. I kind of see it when I read the script or listen to the music. It all starts there. Now, not specifically of lighting as far as what's lit, what part of the stage is lit, what's not, what the focus is, all that. And then obviously this will evolve throughout the entire process to where the most vivid moment, other than actually lighting the show in the theater, is when I'm watching it rehearsals in a rehearsal room where I actually do create the lighting in my head while the actors and or singers or dancers are rehearsing in a probably fluorescent lit room. And that's when I really use my imagination. And then I transfer that to the light plot and then to the theater. And then, of course, as we all know, it still evolves. Even once you get into the theater, all that evolves. So it's this long journey. So it starts at the beginning and ends at the when I leave town. How about you guys?
Well, for me, play versus musical versus dance. So if it's a play, certain scenes, ends of acts, beginnings of acts, reprises, there are certain moments where I have a sort of an image, but I haven't seen the blocking. So I might have some. There may be 2 or 3 or 4 moments that crystallize in my mind, but then I'm sort of blocking it too, or I'm sort of, this time whether I have the scenery. But it really starts to come, like David said, it really starts to come together in the rehearsal room when I hear the actors saying it and I see them moving about and the director staging it. That's when I sort of start to, that Gene Rosenthal called it the flash, right? I start to get a flash of insight in my head and I see an image and go, oh, that's it. That's for plays. For musicals, I can start with the music. So the music will leave me with mental impressions and I can take some notes about what I'm feeling or what the color is or what an image is from just listening to the music over and over and over again and getting the music into my bones. And then for dance, man, it's just sitting in the dance studio when the choreographer is creating the work at the beginning. And if we're friendly, just sitting together and talking about what it feels like in each phrase and each moment. And then we might agree or disagree or talk about, as I'm taking notes and watching the piece, particularly after they develop a section and they might sit down and chat with me. So that's a more iterative, organic process in dance. So that's sort of how I look at that. And then in architecture, let me see the drawing, right? And the drawing helps. And then let me see the model. And the 3D model really, I start to get ideas about how something might want to be lit and thinking about what we're actually going to be doing in this space.
For me, it really begins with the conversation with the director. And, a couple of questions I ask, is the lighting a character in the show? Is the lighting soft or sharp? It's very difficult. So it's fairly late in the process. I don't fall in love with music or let it take me someplace. The risk in this whole process is that you develop an idea and you can't let go of it once you realize the idea is not going to work. You think, oh, this is going to be a green scene. And the director says it really needs to be white. It's a difficult thing. I mean, for me, I'm starting to see it as I draft it. And that's, again, late in the process, I guess. So, that's kind of how I work. I mean, it's an organic process, but I try to be open. So much of the dance that I've done over the years is choreographed in silence, and the music is then scored after the dance is completed. So I don't have that baggage going into it. For me, it is the conversation. All of my work in the last 15 years has been new work, new plays. And so for me, it's always been the kind of conversation with the director and the playwright, and actually more the playwright than the director, about where this thing is going to go, if that's obscure enough.
It's fantastic. And I think it's really cool that you're able to do that. I know a lot of designers do that because that's the process. But that's really interesting.
Well, it's kind of a death trap if you're doing rock and roll, and all of a sudden, you're off on this journey without the projection designer and the artist and the costume designer with you, because you can create something that's gorgeous, and everybody looks at it and goes, "Well, that's nice, but not for this song." So one of our guests, I forgot who it was talking about he or she was hired to do a concert, and they said, we want you because, I'll just make it up. We saw your work with Madonna, and it was gorgeous. We absolutely want that, but it can't look like Madonna.
Right.
we want you for this reason, but it can't look like that because this is not a Madonna concert.
Yeah, but isn't that the case for anything? A director will hire you maybe because they saw your work on another show and they know that you're sensitive or that you're bold or whatever your style may be of lighting, that they want that style more than specific colors or effects that used for another artist.
Well, John Lee Beatty used to talk about that, and he would say he would pay real money to design a show that didn't have a sofa in it. Absolutely. I do think
he was
I do think you get,
typecast.
I do think you get hired for your style or
Right.
what you bring to it.
Or your working attitude, the way you work with other people. I know we're going to sort of be talking a little bit about that a little later, and let's talk about. But their personalities, and it's really important that you find the right personalities to work with. There's some directors who I really don't like working with, and I rarely work with them all, unless for some reason I have to work with them. But all the directors I work with now regularly, there are only a handful of them. We work with each other not because, or they don't hire me because I'm a great artist or whatever. They hire me because they like my personality, they like the way I work, they like the way I collaborate with them, and that style that's very unique that would not go with another type of director.
Well, sure, you have that relationship that spans decades.
Oh yeah, decades.
And you've been through weddings and funerals, and
unfortunately,
companies at the edge of bankruptcy and coming back. So, I mean, you kind of know what your team is and what they're capable of doing. I think it's the same way you put together a repertory acting company. You kind of figure out what their strengths are, what they bring to the project.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today's episode is sponsored by...
From south of the border, it's Bad Hombre Stage Productions. Well, COVID is in the rear view mirror, and we are getting back to work. Festivals, summer stock, and concerts are all opening. But maybe your little reptile brain is telling you to proceed with caution. You could be vulnerable at the tech table, surrounded by dozens of people, and let's not forget the hundreds at a concert. Coughing, sneezing, spitting, burping, wheezing. The list goes on and on. After all, no one wants to be the last recorded case of COVID. That is why the good men and women of Bad Hombre Stage Productions offers the Circulo de Muerte. That's right, the circle of death. As the average cough travels a mere 6 feet, the circle of death is compact and easy to install, taking up minimal space around the console. Step 1. Unfold the 12-foot safety yellow mat and install your FOH position in the center. Step 2. Insert the carbon fiber vertical rods and attach the electric cattle fence. Keep the crowd out and your friends in. Step 3. Fill the optional moat with stale beer and urine to create a zone of stench that will kill any virus and keep the crowd away. Ask about our optional storage tank to make travel and setup easier, or just ask the crowd to contribute. Finally, step 4. Lower the dome of solitude to ensure your well-being. It's as easy as that. The Circulo de Muerte. And if the circle of death is just a little too tame, step up to our concert border wall. Bad Hombre Stage Productions. Sleep well, gringos. We have your back.
Well, they got to do something with that stupid wall. Just tear it down and sell it. Damn it. Sell pieces of it to circle the tech table with, I mean, it may be hard to look over. That's the problem because it's pretty high. But actually you can see through it because aren't they slotted walls? I think the wall's slotted, so you can sort of see through it.
I haven't been down the border in a while, but
Get down there.
I know this is a little controversial, but
it is controversial.
There was a guy down at the border wall, at least one section of it. He realized he could take a crescent wrench out and remove one bolt, and the vertical slat would move, like it would swing back and forth like a pendulum. So it's only 20 million a mile. So
wow, that's crazy.
And now back to Light Talk.
The sound of those rabid ducks tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about, other than visualizations and research, how should a designer prepare for the first meeting with the director in theater or the client in architecture? Yeah, we've been talking a lot about visualization and communication and communicating ideas and all that. But this is really important because this is the first meeting. And whether you're meeting with a director for the first time about the show or you're meeting with a client in architecture about a project, what are the most important elements that you must have prepared for this meeting? And I'm going to just kick this off to Stan.
Well, I would start off by saying that I think there's always a client, right? And it could be the director, it could be the producer. It's, whoever's paying your check is the client, right? And there's a question too about whether or not you have the job yet. So I don't know. In theater, usually you get the job through word of mouth. Somebody comes to you, negotiate, you get the job, and they're not really competing. In architecture, it's not so much that. At least where I'm working is like there's always a competition. So there's going to be multiple people or firms, trying to get the job, and there's going to be an interview process, and it's very sort of regimented. I think in theater it's a little more informal, right? And I work in a situation where everything is, you're talking about municipalities, they have laws and how everybody's got to be treated equally, and sort of like it's almost like a search committee in academia. But with all of that said, if you're going to a project, somebody's spending money, whether it's theater or rock and roll or architecture, and they're spending a good amount of money. So you got to respect that. So I think you want to present yourself in a way that shows that you respect the work. So wear a jacket. Dress nice, comb your hair,
dress for
take
success.
A shave, dress for success. It's not about it's not about your ego. It's about showing that you respect the process and you respect the person you're meeting with and the people you're meeting with. You take the work seriously. If you come in with there was this great somebody posted this great story about Bill Graham in Russia on this rock concert and how he had a torn-off T-shirt and he was just. But that's a kind of a different time in a different world, right? But I think that's important. And then I think if you're going to be speaking. Now, you guys know that I'm pretty extemporaneous on Light Talk, but when I go into a meeting, I'm much more structured. So I sort of know what I want to talk about. I'm going to lead the client through the things I want to get across to them and what I want to say. I've got notes. I've got it in my head, and I do my best. So recently, we've gotten some projects, and actually we've lost some projects. Which I should say, we weren't selected. So when you don't get selected, it's sort of good to try and find out, like, what was it? Why didn't you get it, right? And what could you do better next time? Or if you did get it, what is it that you had, or what is it that you did or said why you were selected? And I think that's a really interesting way to sort of get better at securing projects.
For me, I would urge our listeners to take a script with them and take a notebook with them. And so you and the director work through the script together, and you have questions. Okay, let's talk about scene 3 here. I'm not quite sure where that's taking place, or time of day, or what are they actually talking about. So I think you come with those two things in your hand, and then I think you bring the ability to listen. So, you take your radio and you turn it off. It's on receive, not on transmit. And you listen to what the director has to say. And then you may respond to those ideas in real time, or you may respond to the director the next day. I think one of the big wastes, particularly with young designers, is they say things like, okay, I'll get back to you in a week. I think you want to get back the next day. Not all of your ideas have to be Tony Award-winning ideas, but I think you want to keep the conversation alive and keep the conversation going. Again, time is your enemy. So the more you can find out, the more you can catalog and write down. If you spread your arms wide apart, that's kind of where you begin. And if you start moving your arms together to where I guess you could clap, you're removing all the stuff the show isn't. And you're getting down to what the show is, and you know what those parameters are. So script, and read it. And, for me, I will read the script several times before I'll meet with a director. I'll also find out as much as I can about the playwright. And I'll, if it's cat on a hot tin roof, then I'll go back and I'll do some research on Tennessee Williams. What's he talking about? Why did he write it? What was going on in his life at this time? I try to become a little mini expert in whatever I'm working on at that time. I'm not, but I want to know as much as I can so I can have a better conversation with the director. What about you, David?
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, you need to be as prepared as possible. And if you know that you're going to be working on a play or a musical or whatever, an opera, you better know that music. You better know that play like the back of your hand before you meet the director. And another thing that Steve said that was really, really important is that you do your research. Like Steve was talking about researching Tennessee Williams, the playwright, but also historical research. I'm going through that right now. I'm doing this huge project in Helsinki that opens next year, and it's based on Chernobyl. And I have never done as much research for a show that I have done for this show. This has been going on for like 3 years now. And the show is actually supposed to open this year, but now with COVID, obviously, they changed it, and it's going to be next year. But I can't tell you how much research I've done on that show. So when I meet with the director, I know what the hell I'm talking about. And one other thing that Steve said that I disagree just a bit. I agree with the idea of timing, but I don't think you can even wait a day. I think you need to have an idea right at that moment. I think that if the director says something, don't say, I'll get back to you tomorrow. You have to be able to be facile, because that's how lighting designers work. And of course, all this depends on the personality of the director. It all depends on the relationship that you may have with the director, how they work, how you work with that director. And if it's a new director, you just want to be prepared. You want to be able to listen, and then you want to be able to react artistically. Don't react technically. Don't say, well, we don't have enough money in the budget to do that. Hold off on that. Don't kill the idea, because you can usually work off the initial idea in a budget-friendly way. It may not be using the same equipment, but obviously you can come up with the same idea or allow that to transition to another idea. So you deal with directors, you deal with clients, as Stan says, in a way that is sort of like jamming. That you're feeding off of what they're saying, and then they're feeding off of what you're saying, and all of a sudden you have a conversation and a really great artistic relationship for that show.
Let me offer a little bit of a insight or twist on the architecture side. The process is a little bit more, I guess it's fluid at the beginning, and like they teach architects in architecture school to walk through the building, to kind of be first person with it. And like you were talking about with this Helsinki project, David, you are probably so immersed in the whole subject of Chernobyl. You're probably a mini expert on it, as you should be. And I think the same happens in architecture. It's like, I want to get to know the building I'm working in. We like to do renovations, and so there's a lot of hidden information. So I'm figuratively and literally crawling around the building all the time, poring over the plans, going to the site, taking my flashlight, going up in the catacombs. I want to understand the building as deeply as I can, so that when you begin what they call the shredding process, which we would call the brainstorming process, you can respond, in a very sort of quick and creative way. And then at a certain point, about a third of the way through the process, I call it the plaster starts to harden, right? Because and that's when the budget starts to play in, and the pragmatics and the engineers are saying, no, you can't do that because we can't support it or whatever. And those kinds of things start to really firm up. And at a certain point, you sort of you're committed, right? But early on, you have that same fluidity that we have in the theater. So I think it's a very, very similar process, but I actually think that we can learn a lot from how they work. I think some of the chaos that we experience could be minimized without disturbing the organic creativity or the discovery and process, because there's just there's a structure that's that everybody comes in knowing. Whereas in theater, you always got to get to know the lay of the land at a particular company. They're all very unique. So it's just interesting to me when I look at both worlds, like which one, what from architecture would, I think, enhance our work, and what do we do that architecture can loosen up a little bit like we do in the early phases and be a little bit more experimental and organic. But I think they're really complementary in a lot of ways, and I encourage people to look at both worlds if they can, for all kinds of reasons.
There's one thing I want to say, because that really spurred an idea. If this is a new director or a new client, they're basically looking at you. They're sussing you out.
That's
So
right.
you have to be real careful. You don't want to be overconfident. You don't want to just start talking and taking control. You have to be as sensitive to their personalities as they are being to you, because it's sort of like a first date. It really is.
It is.
And then
It's
we've all
really
been
so
on those
good.
first dates when, someone is trying too hard. You don't want to try too hard, but you want to be able to respond in a very clear way and not just talk for the sake of talking.
David, that is so key what you just said. And I'll tell a little story. I'm doing a project now that started 2 years ago. And the client, in this case, it was a client, it's sort of like having a dance or a play that's not fully written. Like Steve works on new work and he's adapted a beautiful response to how to work in that way. Well, these guys, they kept changing what they wanted. So I kind of came with a design that could cover everything, right? But it was quite expensive. But because I could not nail them down to what it is they really needed, it became a very expensive proposition. And that was the first time they've worked with me. And I think it freaked them out. I think they had sticker shock. And then, of course, COVID happened and the project was put on hold. And I think they weren't sure whether to bring me back in because, here's the guy who came with this really expensive solution. Maybe we should look at somebody else, because that was the first impression. And fortunately, in my conversations with the architect, and there's an architect and a client, and my client's the architect, but what we call the end user, the people who are going to live in the building, are the ones that have to kind of generate the program or what they need. And fortunately, I got back in on the project, thankfully. Good luck, perhaps. And this time, they knew me, and I was a little more forceful in saying, I really need to understand more deeply what it is you want to do. And I got them to talk, and then I kind of verified, okay, I think I can do this differently, and I think I can do it for a lot less money now that I really understand. And they gave me the opportunity. They brought me back on. They signed me up. And it's just the way I was with them, very honest, very genuine in the room. And then I put together my new design, and then I had a meeting. And in this meeting, they needed to approve the money. So I structured it in 3 ways. There were 3 rooms. There was a ballroom, there's an art gallery, and there's a building facade and canopy. And on each one, I had a plan, a schematic to show them, and I had a visualization. So each phase, each element had 3 parts. You're going to see the drawing, you're going to see the visualization, and then question and answers on that piece. And then the next one, you're going to see the drawing, you're going to see the visualization, and then Q&A. And we went through that very methodically. I put on my jacket, I had a nice shirt on, I was looking good. It was all on Zoom. And then I waited a week, and I heard, they've approved it all. But it could have went the other way. So I think there's sort of a lesson in how you bring yourself and the work to the table in a way that is sensitive and aware of situational awareness is, I think, what David is saying. And I think it's a really key point.
So Steve has our last question of the day.
Randy in Kansas asks, do you use the color picker on your console? No.
A controversial subject right here.
No, it's not controversial. No.
I agree with Steve. I
do
agree
too.
with Steve.
I do too.
It gets in the way. It gets in the way, Randy. Build your own library.
It's a dartboard.
I'm assuming you're doing rock and roll. I'm hoping you're not doing a color picker for your production of Long Day's Journey into Night. Concert. There are 8 colors. That's all you need. Red, blue, green, cyan, magenta, yellow, white, and then toss in a little Congo blue. That gives me my complementary color range: red, green, blue, yellow, amber, magenta, cyan, amber. And then if I'm lucky, I've got the triad colors: red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow. And if I'm doing a Grateful Dead concert, I throw a little purple in.
Absolutely. UV, baby. UV.
Well, because if you have that group there and they're all dropping acid, then purple is a marker color along with red, green, and yellow. LSD, enhances those colors. But no, color pickers, man, I mean, they may have had a purpose years ago, but not anymore.
Why did they even put them there, I wonder?
They put them there so they can sell these consoles to high schools and to colleges and say, oh, there's a color picker on it. it's a starting place, I guess. And everyone
Yeah.
kind of hits, surprise pink, and surprise, it's not pink. It's not even close. So, I tell you the secret. Randy. Get yourself a Lico and stick, you don't even have to do that, but it helps. Turn your light on, hold a gel in front of your one eye, and then match it, if you're that desperate to do it. No, color pickers, I'm waiting for manufacturers to get rid of color pickers so they can use that processing power for something else.
I think you don't learn much about color when you use a color picker, right? So I will say, let's talk about one manufacturer. Let's talk about ETC, which I think there are 8 different interfaces for color in that 8 or 9. I have to open my thing and see. And if you use that, if you really learn what happens when you do something to a color, when it's shining on a particular target. So here's a simple thing. Learn how color interacts with material. What I do with my students is we have X-Rite color checkers, which is a card that you can buy inexpensively. We have 2, frankly. Okay, and it has a range of from white to black and all the grayscales, and then it has 15 different samples, which basically represent the color gamut of almost any object. And then you put your light on that thing and start to explore what happens when you make changes to understand how color and material interact. And the way to do it truthfully, if you're using a 7-color LED fixture, is to put it in direct mode and move each color of LEDs independently and see what happens to the target. And you'll start to get it into your head, when I do this, this happens. And when I do that, that happens. David and Steve and I have a pretty good idea only because we've been doing it so long, right? But we still get surprised because materials don't always react the way you think they're going to react. That's called metamerism, right? And what a metamer is something you could look up. So I think the color picker robs us of the educational experience of how color and materials interact because we take the mental shortcut by just throwing a dart at a color picker. You go in there, open it up in direct mode. Let's say you have this ETC luster, okay? Open up the luster and set it in direct mode. Get yourself a $10 color checker card, shine it at it, and move each set of LEDs independently and watch what happens. You will be blown away. Most of us don't know. We've just got this new tool of independent frequency control with multiple LED fixtures. So yeah, you're robbing yourself of knowledge by jumping to the color picker as your solution. That's my soapbox. I'm getting down now.
I like how you phrased that when you said, frankly, we have 2. And then you said they were $10 each. Stan, you can afford 3.
That's right.
One for each student.
Actually, let me look it up. I'm going to tell you right now how much an X-Rite colored checker is.
And while you do that, I'm going to close out the show. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, LiveDesignOnline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you decide to litigate us, the law firm of Flex, Flock, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted. $65 for the X-Rite color checker is the cheapest price I can find online.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we welcome back Lumen brother Driscoll Otto to talk about more happenings in our crazy industry.
All of that and the new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Toodles.